Alright, so I'm getting some more copper out of scrap motors so I can fill up another 5-gallon bucket of copper. And to give you all context, I took the last 5-gallon bucket filled to the top of copper windings from these motors, and I got from the scrapyard, they were paying $1.60 a pound, and I got 33 pounds, so it came up to like $52.80. That's also the same number for feet in a mile, 52.80 I believe. So today, I thought I would show you all taking off the pulleys and taking off the end bells and the bearings to get to just the stator, and then what I do with that after to get that out. So what you see me do in the previous video where I have it in the vise and I'm cutting the windings out. So what I got here first is I got a pulley, but I got two different pulleys. So this one is a fixed pulley, and sometimes it has a tapered bushing that it meshes with, and then usually be 2 or maybe even 3 bolts that you use to tighten the taper together. But in this case, it's just a fixed pulley, like I said, and it's just a straight bore through the pulley, and it slides right over the shaft. And it's about, I would say, a couple thousandths, maybe 2/1000ths of an inch oversize, so it can slide on the shaft, and it gets locked down with the set screw, and the set screw tightens down on the key. So in order to get this loose, the first thing I'm going to do is take some, I got some BGN force. You can take core oil, WD-40, any kind of penetrating fluid, soak it up, get that soaking, and then I'll loosen the set screw. So I got the right Allen key, and if I can find my adjustable, you should take a 6-inch adjustable, and I put the the hole end, I put the handle end, I would say, in on the Allen key, and I'll just see if I can break it loose just like that. Now the longer these motors sit outside or in a moist environment, the more rusty everything's going to be, so you might not be as lucky. But all we want to do is just get a couple turns loose, maybe even not even a full turn, because all you want to do, and this hole was actually shallow enough I could just put the short end of the Allen key in there. And you just want to get it loose a couple turns, because then we're going to go on easy mode, and we're just going to put the puller on here, and it should pull right off. Now, every once in a while, these will be so tight, so rested on the motor shaft, that you hit it with the puller, and it'll put so much tension it'll actually break, because it's very fragile. You don't ever want to hit the sides of these, especially with a hammer, because we've done it out in the field, especially on the rooftop units, and you just break off pieces of the pulley. And if you have to save it to put it on the new motor, if we're changing out a motor, then you're kind of SOL, and you have to call back to the shop, and boss got to order a new pulley. But since we got that loose, I'm going to see if I can go ahead and get this puller set up on it. And I'm going to actually have to bring the, so I just got my 3/4 on my 1/2-inch impact, 3/4 socket. And the puller thread, the long bolt piece is hardened. So keep that in mind if you try to just make your own homebrew one. And always, always wear your safety glasses. That is an absolute must. You must do it because I said so. We don't want anybody have any injuries trying this at home. Especially not me. So you get those 2 jaws on tight. Pretty good. And then I'm just going to go ahead, and once I'll hit it a little bit. If I see it move, right now the motor shaft is sticking out just almost 1/8 inch past the face of the pulley. And if I see it move a little bit when I hit it, then I'll just keep going. So I'm not seeing much. So the other thing I could do here is, since I'm not seeing it move and I don't want to break off the pulley at all, is I'll put my Allen key back in there. What I can do is, and I can actually take the whole thing out. Oh yeah, that's got some rust in there for sure. So what I'll do is I'll just take the whole thing out, and I'll spray some penetrating fluid down in the hole, and that should help free up things some more. And this is your little set screw. It's basically a bolt that doesn't have a bolt head on it, but you go on the inside to grab it. That way it can go down deep in a hole and kind of be hidden away. And then the bottom has little grooves on it all the way around, and whatever it bites into, whatever you're trying to set it against, hence set screw. And you keep that key that it's sitting on from moving, and that way everything's tight, doesn't fly off while this thing isn't spinning at high RPM. So I'll spray some fluid down in there. I actually saw it come out of the front side right on top of the motor key, so that's a good sign to me. That makes me think I should just have to hit this a little bit more, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. Yeah, okay, so it moved. Now it's the face of the pulley is flush with the face of the motor shaft, so I can just keep on going. Okay, perfect. And then if I was out on a job, I would knock this key out, grab some emery paper, sandpaper, sand that up. I would sand the bore out, and I would set it to the side if we were going to reuse it. Now, if the groove was all shiny and it had some cuts in it from the belt, then we would recommend that the customer replace that pulley. So now we just got the motor here. And before I go on, I'm actually going to take you guys over. I'm just going to bring this one into view. This is the other type of pulley I was talking about. So this is an adjustable pulley, or an adjustable sheave, if you will. So I'm actually going to bring it a little bit closer for this one. So this one can be deceiving because you'll see a set screw right here and you think, oh, I just got to loosen that, do the same thing I did on the fixed pulley. But no, this one's actually different because these two halves here are actually threaded on to a centerpiece here of the pulley, of the sheave. So this set screw right here actually only pushes down on this key, but that key is not on the motor shaft. The motor shaft is all the way down here. So actually, what you can do is sometimes you will have to loosen this and then take the key out by getting a little pair of vice grips, grabbing it here and hoping that you can wiggle that key out after you loosen the set screw. And then you'll actually have to try to unthread this whole piece, and you can see there's some big threads here. Unthread it off of the sheave, off the pulley, and then it will reveal another set screw down in here that it actually pushes on a key that is on the motor shaft. But in this case, we are good because let me give you some light here. And if you just come around, if I showed you the first key in the first set screw that we're not going to mess with, if I just bring you towards the back, in front of the drive side end bill, if we just kick this over, we see there's another set screw hole, and there's a set screw down in there, and that, my friends, goes all the way down to the motor shaft. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'll spray some penetrating fluid around the motor shaft first, and then if this is super rusty, you can actually take a wire wheel or some emery paper if you can and clean it up as best you can, so that way it'll slide off the motor shaft better or pull off. But I'm going to go ahead, take that set screw all the way out, excuse me, spray some penetrating fluid down in there, and then hopefully this one will come off. Because this is basically the standard of what we do out in the field, especially when we're on our rooftop. We don't have the shop, we don't have the torch at our disposal, so we must make do with what we got. So actually first, I'll get this soaking, and then the hole, the motor key doesn't appear to be that long, so I can actually put the straw of the penetrating fluid can in the hole and spray some fluid in there. Get it kind of deep in there, get the fluid in there, and let it start to work its thing, work its little magic. And I got the Allen key in here. I'll see if this will break loose, and it does. And again, just, results may vary. You may be coming across a much, much rustier situation. And at that point, you're just going to have to start wailing on the thing with a hammer, break it up, or, I don't know. If you don't have to save the motor, you can cut the motor shaft off from behind the pulley and But I mean, if it's so rusted over there more, you're probably not saving the pulley. So that is that. And then in another video, this is the wait, let me get my leg out the way. This is the pecker head junction box right here, and you can actually meg those with a megger, and that'll tell you if the motor is still good or not electrically, and like with the windings. So 'cause we're always getting motors into our shop, we're replacing the motor bearings, but then we can also meg the motor to make sure electrically it's still good and it's not going to conk out of them, even if they get fresh bearings. Okay, this set screw is coming out slowly but surely, so you're going to give it a little help here. It's just real tight, real rusty in there. Ugh. But it is going, which is always a good sign. Because if you are watching my 95 Mustang GT tear down of the intake manifold, the top end, on the lower intake manifold, I broke 2 of the bolts, and that was initially the worst thing until I figured out I could buy a Burns-O-Matic torch from Home Depot, and using a Dremel and a 1-inch cutting wheel, I could cut a flathead slot, heat up the stud, the rest of the stud, and then with some penetrating oil as well, all that together, I was able to get those studs out, thankfully. Otherwise, we would have been in a bind, and way behind, and that car would still be in the garage here. But you can see we got the blue Miata in the garage. So that doesn't really need any work, thankfully. I could get the fog lights working again, but other than that, the projects have slowed down. I'm not swamped with things to do, but I do like a good project. So but just a balance, you know, I would like a balance. So I'm gonna get the puller on here now, and usually I use a smaller impact, but here we are at the garage. I'll unthread the puller out, and that should reach. You're gonna make sure your jaws are centered up. If you have a 3-jaw, even better, because you'll have that much of a better grab with 3 jaws rather than 2 on whatever you're trying to pull off. And we'll see if we get any movement here. Yep. Look at that. All right, the puller definitely ate into the face of the motor shaft a little bit, but that's fine. We got it out. All good there. So that's the pulley off the motor shaft. And the coil definitely doing its work. It definitely worked itself in about, you know, halfway through the bore. You can see the other side of the bore is still pretty dry. So the fluid didn't quite get through all the way, but we got it. So that's the difference between a fixed pulley and an adjustable pulley. And the adjustable pulley, as you thread in, it closes the gap between here, and the belt will ride either up more towards the outside or down more towards the inside of the grooves. That's all that means. Okay, so next, I should be able to, once my leg stops cramping up on the side near the hip, then I want to say this is a 3/8. What am I holding here? Of course, the one time I don't need the 10mm, I have it in hand. Every other time I need a 10mm, I can't find it. So let me open up this. We're looking with 1/4-inch stuff. Do I have standard stuff? I might. Now we go hunting for the correct socket. because it's time to get ourselves correct. What do we got? You know what? I'm just gonna send it 10mm close enough, as my buddy Schleier would say. What do you know? It worked. Okay, so these motors here have a long, basically long bolt, and on the other, once you feed it all the way through the other side of the motor, you'll put this nut on, and that's how you tighten those together. But other motors, not one I have here, but each end bill will just have a regular, 2-inch long bolt or so on, so you'll have a total of 8, 4 on either side. Okay, this is working out. And then one thing I also want to show you is we're taking off the front end bill on this gold Baldor motor, is sometimes if you have a whole pump assembly, like these two guys over here, these, be very careful. Those have plastic impellers. Those will break super easily if you put a puller on those. If you do put a puller on those, I would recommend you turn the puller with a wrench. Definitely by hand, not with impact whatsoever. And I believe this style, it's actually a 2-piece impeller and it's glued together. It's literally glued together. That's what's holding it together, and it spins at high RPM. I don't think that's a good design, but that's how they are. I guess to make them real cheap. And thankfully it does have a steel nut on the end, but still. And I want to say these are threaded on, so the impeller itself actually has threads, and it threads onto the pump shaft. But if you use the puller on those, I repeat, only by hand with a wrench or socket and ratchet. Okay, so, oh, sweet. That actually came out nice and easy. So the motor key on this Baldor motor came out real easy, but usually you might have to get a chisel or a screwdriver and a hammer and knock it out. But that is a win that we shall take, and we have 4 total of these long bolts. Last one. Yep, okay, and that's all she wrote. And then if we were being super careful and saving this motor, what I would do is I get a soft hammer or a screwdriver or an aluminum bar, but I think I should be able to get this off pretty easily. So I take the hammer, yeah, and you can smack the front. And this particular one, let me bring in closer again, has some just kind of ridges built into the end bill, and you can get a flathead screwdriver from behind and smack on those. And just kind of go evenly until you start to get a gap. You see we got the gap here between the stator and the end bill. And then once we get a big enough gap, this end bill will it's actually coming off of the bearing, because the end bill is a fit that slides over the outer race of the bearing. And as it comes off far enough, it'll start to spin on its own. And then we can spin it around and knock it nice and evenly. Oh, almost dropped you. To get it off. So there you go, like so. Like I said, spin it around. And look at that. One end bill off, and it's not a press fit on the outer race of the bearing. It's just tight enough to get it on, and it's not, thankfully, it's not loose enough either that it'll be sloppy and the bearing won't wipe it out. But the bearing rides right in here, and this is always a machined surface in here, and sometimes it has a retaining cap that will actually bolt. So the retaining cap will be on the back side of the bearing, and the face of this end bill will be on the front to capture the bearing in place, so it doesn't have any in and out play. Well, this one you can see is very dirty, has a bunch of, there's some grease in here, but a bunch of that, dirtiness on the outer edge there. So usually we will clean all that up before putting it back together. And now, let me grab a rag first. Now what I'll do is I'll wipe the grease off the face of the bearing. This grease actually doesn't look too bad, It's still got some color to it. We'll come across some motors where the grease is so black, it's like they haven't greased it in forever, and the grease just got so hot and kind of burned up. And I'll wipe off the back of the bearing as well, just because we're gonna pull it off. And actually, honestly, for my purposes, I actually don't have to pull this off, the bearing, because I can just pull out the entire rotating assembly, because I'm just trying to get to that copper winding. And here's a dust shield. I'll actually save this because sometimes we come across this in our shop where we need these, and one will come in from a job and it's cracked. So I'll actually put that aside, clean it up, take it to my shop tomorrow. And at this point, I should be able to just pull the whole rotating assembly right out, just like that. And you got the outboard bearing. Look, the grease is like so black. So that's partially why this motor failed. It could be a mechanical issue, or it could be the windings didn't make right. Either possibility, and it's pretty filthy inside the stator here. If you can see all that crap that came out of it, that's just some of it. So, let me get another rag. This gets real messy real quick. That's why I usually do this in a shop. So wipe the grease off. And sometimes when you just spin these motors by hand, when they come in to the shop, you can tell like, oh, the balls and the bearings are just shot. They're so worn out. But this one here actually doesn't sound too bad, but I bet at high RPM and with a load on it, it could have been sounding rough. Entirely possible. So we'll set that down. We'll take that in the shop, throw it in the scrap bin. We have this guy that came out with it. I don't know what that is, but something wore out and a little shred of that kind of came off. And then so now that there's no bearing in the outboard side, what I can do is I can just spin this around, and I should just be able to knock it off fairly easily with a couple taps from the hammer. So let's give it a shot. If my aim is any good. Look at that. Just need to hit it in the right spot. And here is the outboard side, and almost always the outboard side will have a wavy washer, so you will want to save that because it's kind of got a little spring tension in it, and it'll take up the slack for the outboard bearing, because the outboard bearing almost never has a retaining cap. So that wavy washer will take up that slack, and as it gets crushed down, when this gets tightened onto the stator, there'll be no way for the outboard bearing to have any like unnecessarily in and out play. Unnecessary in and out play. The words. And we'll save this shield, of course. And that's about it for a teardown of a electric motor. They come in all shapes and sizes, all different brands. We got a Baldor, we got an A.O. Smith. We just picked up some Wegs from Pennsylvania the other day. So that's about it. Now the last thing I'll tell you before we end it here is that I will, to get this, just the middle of the stator out with the copper, I'll just take a cutting wheel and I'll just run it along. I'll just draw a line right here and cut all the way down. Because all I need to do is this piece right here is about 1/8 inch thick, maybe a hair more. It's just the outer housing of the stator. So I just have to cut through that about 1/8 inch. Not that much at all, pretty thin. And once I do that, all the tension holding it together will actually split, because now I'll have a split in a circle, and then I'll widen up enough to where this whole inner part will actually just kind of fall out, or I can just pull it out with ease. Now there are some wires going into the pec ribs. I may have to cut those, but other than that, it's pretty easy to get these out, and then I can mount the inner piece, which you see me do before on my channel, in a vise and start cutting the copper away from the very center section of the stator. And yeah, that's my story. Thank you for watching. I'll have some more videos. Let me know if there's anything else you want to see. I will, in the future, I'm thinking about doing a boar and bush video, so whenever these fits go bad, we'll actually have to machine them out and press in a cup that the new bearing can sit inside. That's called a boar and bush of an end bill. So I've only done that a few times in my shop, but I'm thinking about doing a video on that for you all. So that's really all I got. Thank you for watching. This has been another mechanical video for you all. And just remember that if you want to scrap copper, this is the easy part, but actually cutting out the copper out of the middle of the stator, that's the tedious part. And it may not necessarily be worth it. If you have the right setup of tools, it will definitely be worth it. But that's where it stands. A little extra money, a little bit of lunch money for some Indian food, for some whatever cuisine I'm feeling, because DMV is kind of the melting pot for a lot of foods. I know other places are, but this is just where I live. So thank you for watching. See you next video. Take care.